Two new studies explore how some of us may be addicted to food. The most addictive include chocolate, cookies, and chips. The research suggests certain types of food may attract people the same way as heroin and cocaine do. Our own Dr. Holly Phillips joins us this morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Charlie.
So what do these studies tell us?
Right. Well, both of these studies involved about 500 people, and researchers asked them about their attitudes and behavior around food, specifically whether certain foods made them act or feel in ways that go along with addiction, like losing control. And then they honed in on which foods people thought caused them the most problems.
I know potato chips had to be on the list because it is not American to just eat one. It cannot be done.
No, absolutely not surprising.
Are they on the list?
They are on the list. In fact, they're in the top 5.
Yeah,
so things like pizza, chips, cookies. And this isn't surprising. These are foods that are either heavily processed or high in fat, sugar, and refined carbohydrates. Importantly, they also have something called a high glycemic load. And this is in part a measure of how fast and how intensely the foods raise your blood sugar. That's important because that acts on reward centers in the brain and directly affects cravings.
But it's different than drug addiction, isn't it?
It is. It's really important to point out food addiction is not a recognized medical diagnosis. And in fact, the term itself is a little bit controversial. We can't equate it with drugs because, for instance, we know drugs, say heroin, permanently change the wiring of the brain. Drugs make permanent structural changes in your brain that cannot be reversed, and they build tolerance and withdrawal. But on the other hand, we do know some foods act on neurotransmitters in our brains, like dopamine. And even in studies, lab rats develop binging and addictive patterns around double-stuffed Oreos. So there might be some links, but the science is still kind of out there.
How do you know if you're addicted?
Well, there's something called the Yale Food Addiction Survey. You can ask yourself questions specific. How often do you eat more than you've planned to? Do you keep eating even though you're not hungry? Do you eat to the point of feeling ill? And according to respondents in this survey, about 5 to 10% of Americans do have some amount of what they're calling food addiction.
Eat more than planned, eat when not hungry.
It's true. But you know what?
Dr. Holly, I have a problem.
No, but
I don't eat till I'm ill, but I do eat when I'm not hungry.
Yeah, and very few people feel uncontrollable
because
cravings.
Charlie, wait a second.
Yeah.
You'll see something that's just so good and you weren't planning to eat it, but it just looks so visually pleasing. You go, I just got to taste it. That never happens to you?
Not that much.
No.
Really?
You, Nora, that never happens to you?
Well, it does.
Oh
The want happens.
Yeah,
the want happens.
And but then, you have the willpower.
Well, yeah. But I do think there's something in cell biology and your taste buds too that does change. And I think that's a very important thing to recognize because it's not just a willpower issue. There are things change in your cell the more you get attuned to certain types of foods.
Yeah, very much so, Nora. And I think you're touching on this hot button issue. That's why food addiction is such a topic now. The question is, if certain foods are addictive, do food manufacturers play a role?
Yes.
Should they be held accountable? We know they hire scientists to get exactly the right mix of fat and chemicals and sugar. Should they be held accountable for us eating too much?
Yeah, the brain is a very powerful thing.
We actually did a brain series. We have to go, but I mean, we're learning so much about things like addiction and aggression in terms of the brain's chemistry.
Very much so.
But it's not an official diagnosis. Got it.
No.
Thank you, Dr. Holly.
You're clear.
If you want to know whether you're addicted to food, we invite you to go to cbsthismorning.com and take the quiz.